Hey guys, all right, I have a message for you. And this is a really big message, which I probably will make another video about. In fact, even as I was trying to collect my thoughts for it, what Mother showed me was so much, you guys. I could probably write a book about it. Okay, so this is going to be just an entry-level version of what she showed me for a reason, okay? So, because I feel like one of my purposes on this planet is to help awaken the religious indoctrinated, okay? Like that's one of my roles. 44, as I said that. I do believe this is why God had me brought up in a high control religious group so that I could see what happens and what goes on there. Also, you know, there's a lot of reasons for this. I feel like studying the Bible like a theologian has been very important for the awakening journey because Christ will bring these scriptures back up to me, but he will show me what they really mean. And Mary Magdalene does the same thing with me, and Mother Mary as well, okay? Now, for my already awakened or awakening starseeds, okay, we're really talking about the ancient Egyptian pantheon, okay? This is what Mother Mary, Christ, and Mary Magdalene have taught me over the years, okay? But for my newly awakening or my religious individuals who are starting to notice things and who stumble across this video, okay, I'm going to talk about what they showed me for a reason, okay? So if you were brought up in a I would say probably almost any Protestant Christian denomination, maybe not all, but like many of them, you might have been taught that it was wrong to have an idol, okay? And the religion I grew up in has a very strict rule about that. Like even in their temple spaces or church spaces, they have no pictures, nothing on the walls, no windows either. Okay, 222 as I'm saying this. No windows, no pictures. It's just a building with walls and a roof. It literally doesn't even look like a church, okay? And I think they did that because it's a real estate scam so they could resell them easily, okay? That's just my opinion on that. But I want to touch on the whole like no idols thing because there's so many rivers of flow of truth coming through about why they did that and why it actually hurt people, because the ancient artifacts, okay, that there would have been pictures of, statues of, even just family information of, had very significant importance and also would have helped people remember the true story, okay? And I'm gonna actually use some scriptures that I feel like are relevant and that are true, even though I know that much of the Bible was changed and has been altered in order to confuse and control many. All right. But hopefully this is all going to make sense. So how I stumbled across this, okay, was something God showed me in a dream this week about the ancient Egyptian god Anubis, okay? Anubis, I have seen in many sessions that I've conducted here in my business. And I've worked with his energy before to help people when they're retrieving something that is lost, okay? So the best way to put it is when a soul crosses over, if there is any fragment of that soul stuck, Anubis, not only Anubis, I've had a few others help me, a few other guides, Thoth for one thing, Isis of Egypt, the Hathors, different ones will step in and help retrieve these fragments, okay? But he's definitely one of them. Anyway, he was in my dream. I'm not saying specifically what I saw in order to protect the information. However, I want to tell you what I found. When I looked up, I was actually going to look up information about Anubis after dreaming about him. And then what I stumbled across that I think is so relevant, okay? So I'm looking up information about Anubis, And up pops this old Orthodox Christian icon. I'm going to show it to you, okay? It's in Slavic traditions. I mean, like maybe some Gnostic traditions as well, Orthodox Byzantine traditions. I'm just going to show you, I don't even know which one to show you because you can look this up yourself. Okay, I'm going to try to turn my other phone around so you can see. Can you see this? Okay, so he's pictured with St. George or St. Christopher, I think at times. And you can dive down that rabbit hole, but I want to say what I want to say about this for a reason. When it first popped up, it showed Christ in the center of the icon with 4 dogmen around him, and they were all working together. And this was an old church icon, ancient icon, like found in some stone, like carvings underneath some old church space in Europe. Okay, so like very old. And I thought, oh my God, this is just like the dog people of Egypt. I can't believe this is even popping up. Why would this even be here? Okay. Why not just bring up the information about Anubis? And of course, God always has a reason. Okay. So I'm like, what's the reason? Here we go. Right. And, you know, God brings my attention to the rules of my old religion growing up. You couldn't have any pictures of anything, not angels, not anything. And then, of course, this all comes like a big, huge download, by the way. So I'm breaking it down slowly, but this was a huge download. And basically what Mother Sophia told me is that it was a cover-up, okay? So basically, if you go to the Old Testament and you look at the temple description, in the ancient temple, there were idols. There were statues of these entities, these beings, okay? And furthermore, in the holy and most holy of the temple, there were giant statues of the cherubim, which were the creatures with the 4 different heads, with the eagle, the ox, the man, and the lion, and the feet that were on fire, and all the wings with covered in eyes, okay? And essentially what she said was, by removing these things, 722 as I said this, so this is Mary Magdalene coming through, by removing these things from common knowledge, okay? And in case you've never researched this, hundreds of years people fought to try to keep the Bible unchanged, and they burned at the stake like they were witches, even though they weren't, okay? They tried. Many people fought to try to keep it unchanged, and many people fought to change it, okay? And so there was this huge struggle between authentic scripture and like the lies and the weeds that were infiltrating everywhere, okay? But I want you to think about what I'm going to say, okay? So think about when your guides show you something, okay? Whether you're a newly awakening soul or you're midway on this journey or you're deep into it, you'll see sometimes like an image or a symbol, or you might stumble across a billboard or a car tag or just something that makes you think and get the message. Boom, just like that, right? And how quick you can get a message from one symbol. So if you wanted to cover up the story here, what would you remove? The symbols, the statues, the pictures, the sacred geometrical codes, okay? Now, we already know there was a reset. My guides told me this. This happened, the last great one was 1700s, what we would consider the 1700s, okay? And when they did that, what they tried to do was basically remove all proof of the goddess and the matriarchy and the beautiful infrastructure that existed before this domination, okay? Before this interference with the stargates and this interference with humanity's ability to connect, okay? So you're talking about an infrastructure of architecture, okay? Designed by humans, but guided divinely, okay, through higher beings that were not gods. People would have thought they were gods, okay, but were very advanced beings, and they guided this architecture, and this architecture created an infrastructure of light, okay, free energy, something Tesla knew about, okay, that when they shattered all of this, it collapsed the grid, okay? So if you're talking about grid work and star beings and orbs and ships and all that, okay, This is connected. This is a connected story. This is why there has been such a great attempt to cover up the feminine story, the goddess story, the true writings of ancient scripture versus the lies, okay? And to infiltrate everything with lies. Because once the grid was restored, the interference you feel sometimes when you're trying to pray or connect, and maybe you can't get your thoughts together, or there's so much distraction, or whatever it is that seems to kind of get in your way sometimes, all of that would just collapse, because essentially the true original grid would be restored, okay? And that's happening now. The original grid is being restored. So I'm not saying this as a doomsday message. I'm saying this as a way to help those newly awakening to kind of get where we are, okay? And work their way past the religious indoctrination and see the truth, okay? So, all right. She's saying, okay, so they took out all these symbols. And then she brings my attention, okay? So Sophia Christ brings my attention to Rachel in the Bible. Rachel, the wife of Jacob, the father of Israel, Abraham's son, okay? And she reminds me that Rachel tried to take her idols with her when she was leaving her father's house, okay? And then we know that when they arrived wherever they were going, God, who was not God, okay, in the scriptures, this is a false entity, said she is unclean, she has something she's hiding, and she can't bring this into the city. We know this is an inverted story. There's a huge cover-up around the scriptures. So when you think you're reading about God, you may not be reading about God. This is something you really need to ask your connection to God. Ask the true God. Ask source of wisdom and knowledge. What really happened here? Okay? What really happened was those idols that she had were, first of all, sacred knowledge, remembrance of their story, of her people, okay? Of the land where she came from, which was different from Jacob. We know she was a cousin to Jacob, so of a branch of Israel, right? But not the same tribe as him, okay? And they had their own beliefs, and they had their own ways, and they had their own stuff. Okay, all right. So, and there, I could take this so many directions, okay? The oppression of the feminine, all that. There's so many ways we could dissect the story, but this is the one I'm going to focus on right now. When you look up that account, you will find something called teraphim, okay? Now, I think it's very strange that we've got seraphim, cherubim, and we've got teraphim. Something nobody's talking about, but it's there in the Bible. And this was the name used for household gods because it was a common thing, okay? And what it said was in ancient Mesopotamian culture, household gods conferred the right to the father's estate. Think about this. Think about what I'm about to tell you, okay? What are we saying is being covered up here? The matriarchy, the goddess, the feminine story. Rachel wasn't allowed to keep her rightful property according to the God of Jacob. Why? Why wouldn't she be entitled to her father's estate? Now, I mean, you guys, there's a lot of rabbit holes we can go down here. Being sold into slavery, the agreement between the father and the father, her not being considered, or her sister, okay? It's painted to look like a good story. Probably isn't, but anyway. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Like, she had to give up her rights to anything that she should have inherited from her family in order to step over into this land. It's very strange. Energetic agreements, giving up rights. It's just the story takes a dark turn, if you think about it, okay? Now, so what Christ Sophia was showing me was not only did removing all these things cause people to forget the story of the feminine, okay? It collapsed the infrastructure when the reset happened. So all the ancient architecture that was supportive of the light grid, okay? So stone and crystal can hold light and they work together. And when they're designed a certain way, think of how you design like a crystal and a laser to get it to point to focus that energy in a certain direction, okay? It's no different. Crystal technology, even on a grand scale, that requires a certain design for the energy to connect through a proper what would you call that? Yeah, they're calling it like when you coil wire, you're actually helping it to focus its energy and to channel properly. And listen, I'm not an electrician. I'm not an architect. I'm just telling you how the guides are showing me this, okay? So the attempt to cover up the feminine, the architecture had to be destroyed, right, to cover up that story. But also they had to give up all their rights to property, okay? Then all their proofs of their rights to property were gone. Now, doesn't this sound like Salem, Massachusetts? Going in, calling everybody witches, killing everybody, and taking all the land? Okay. Now, I don't feel her rage behind this the way I have in the past. The anger about it is kind of like resolved because it's done. It's already been done, that she has already reignited. The feminine has already reignited, and she will whatever oppression they did before, whatever they tried to do to us before is completely over. In other words, there's no turning back. She's saying the goddess is here. Okay, that's it. So she's not saying this as like an angry message, and I don't even feel the rage over it, right? Like I used to. What she's telling you this for is to help you process quicker what has taken some of us years to learn, okay? That the cover up to suppress the feminine and to harness her children and to enslave her children was a many-layered process, including this infiltrated false story when the scriptures were changed, okay? Because if you had in your church, for example, some ancient pictures of seraphim, or first of all, seraphim, you would have seen a serpent. You would have seen an angel that looked like a serpent because they're serpentine. So at the same time, you've got one scripture calling the serpent evil, and you've got another scripture calling them angelic. So you see the big cover up? So these are things we have to think about. And I think this is very important for people awakening from religious indoctrination, okay? You have to really examine the details. Most people, first of all, have not read the Bible, okay? So how are they even going to get the details? They're not. They're not going to see the inconsistencies, that one verse says this, another verse says that. We know with Abraham that one verse tells him to go and sacrifice his child. And then a few verses later, an angel intervenes and says, don't do this. So we know he was here in more than one entity. You know what I'm saying? So when you start waking up to that, you can start realizing the deception, and you can start working on your own discernment, really reading scriptures individually, asking God for true guidance on what it really means, and understanding that there has been an entity or few, we'll call it a few, not actually that many, but a few powerful entities here trying to control the narrative for so long, okay? But they are not more powerful than you and God and the collective, okay? So it's really important to let go of fears. I said this in my video the other day. Let go of fears. Really trust God to love you no matter what your viewpoints are, because there's so much indoctrination on judgment and punishment, and that's all manipulation, control tactic, making you fear actually thinking something outside of what you've been indoctrinated to think. Okay, it's like, think of the Wizard of Oz, okay, and how he had the flying monkeys and all these things trying to prevent them from getting to the Emerald City, and then not wanting them to see what was behind the curtain. A regular man, not more powerful than them. They faced more challenges, came through more darkness than that man. So it's kind of the same thing, you guys. Like, there's these entities, these few little entities that are like, ooh, don't let them see the story. Send the flying monkeys, act crazy, make it look as crazy as possible so they can't figure it out. And then the hope is that everyone would be so distracted and so confused and realize even that they've been lied to. And then when that happens, you think you can't trust anything. You see all the manipulation tactic and all the chaos. And their hope was that this would keep them from finding what was behind the curtain. Actually, for years, people have talked about the Wizard of Oz being an awakening story with many hidden messages. And it really is. Because even behind the curtain, think of the curtain of the Holy Temple. Okay? What was behind the curtain? The Ark of the Covenant, right? The cherubim. two versions of the cherubim, okay? Gold, solid gold, whatever was in the ark, okay? Now, there are many spiritual teachers that believe that the true Holy Grail, okay, and what was considered to be inside of the ark was actually inside of the womb of a woman, and that we are the temple, okay? And I believe this is a very accurate rendering of what these stories told. What the physical objects were meant to do was help you remember your own power, which is what the churches didn't want you to know. And not because people would abuse this power, but because if you could heal yourself, 2020, as I said this, if you could heal yourself, if you could connect to God on your own, if you could understand your own divinity, then you're an uncontrollable human being. And they can't manipulate you. So this is what the narcissists don't want, right? They don't want to see themselves. They want to, everything's all about like, you, and what's wrong with you, and come here so we can help you fix yourself. No, okay? There's so many important reasons to realize how very powerful you are, to whatever your religious story is, wherever you come from. I'm coming from this place of kind of helping people deprogram false Christianity, like a false version of Christianity. But it could be, your background could be anything. Your background could be not even religious at all. And there would still be things that we need to like deprogram out of our thinking because of systemic abuse, okay? But I like to do this because I feel like that's part of, like I said, when I've asked my guides specific information about who I'm here to help, I am here to help many people all over the world. I know this, but in specific, I really think deprogramming false religious concepts wrapped around the Old Testament are very important because so many people are entangled in those weeds. So many. And it's disentangling now. It's going to completely unravel because what's about to be revealed is just going to blow people's minds. But anyway, hopefully these fragments of what I'm sharing will help someone. Okay? And look up some of these concepts, you guys. Look what happened when I looked up Anubis. I was actually going to look into the Egyptian side of things because of what I saw in my dream. But look at all the old icons that had the dog people in it, and the cat people, and the serpent angels, and all the stuff that you see in Egypt and of ancient Atlantis, okay? So this is what they didn't want you to know, the very ancient and extraterrestrial story here. I mean, yeah, there's so much more I could say about this. It's just too long of a video for today because I actually have clients coming. But I just wanted to get that part of it out. Hopefully, whoever this is for, this is going to come to you and help you in some way. By the way, I think it's Genesis chapter 31 if you want to read about Rachel keeping her idols and how she hid them, and even the whole feminine story is in there. But like I said, this all goes back to the suppression of the feminine, okay? And the cover-up. And what, even the possession of the land. Which, by the way, how can you possess a living body? You cannot. We all have our homes. I have my business. But this is mother's body. Not something I can own or possess. Just like you can't own or possess a human. Or anything. Even a pet chooses you. You understand? So there's so much unraveling right now. And I just think it's relevant. I don't know. There's so much there. I feel like I could go on and on and on about this. Because like I said, oh my gosh, they showed me so many things. They're talking about Jesus and when he died. There's so much there too. But anyway, that's covered up. But I think it's relevant that according even to the Bible, his last words were, "See your mother." So if we just took that one little line as a piece of advice, to see the mother, okay? Maybe that was the most important thing he could think of to say. You know, like what do people say when they're about to die? Whatever they think is the most important thing that someone needs to know. And in his case, someone so influential, someone so groundbreaking says, "See your mother." Think about that, okay? So anyway, I know I'm going to end up having to make more videos about everything she showed me. It was just too much, you guys. My notes went on and on and on. But that's a start. Hopefully it helps somebody, okay? I love you guys. I hope you're well. Bye.